Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom of our
Welcome
host,
to
Dr.
the second
E.
installment of what we hope will be many more episodes of Emotional Algebra with Dr. E, a podcast to help us all become better human beings. I am Andrew Tavani, your co-host.
And I'm Dr. E.
That's right. Our expert is Dr. Eric Fisher, better known as Dr. E. To the many people he's helped in the past, you may also recognize him from some of his many TV appearances over the years in places like CNN, Fox TV networks, NBC, the Weather Channel, AccuWeather. Dr. E, let's start by, we talked about this last time, but I want to ask again for anyone who might be joining us for the first time, what inspired you to do this type of a podcast?
Well, just as this with starting to write the books I've written, The Art of Managing Everyday Conflict and The Art of Empowered Parenting, the man you wish your kids came with, it came really at the urging of the people that I work with and help. There's ways that I see the world in the models of power that we're going to talk about, the ways I look at emotion that is different from the way a lot of other people see it. And they were wondering, where can I see about this or learn more about this?
And as I mentioned last time too, when I first heard about this and you came to me and we went over the material and I got introduced to it, I really thought that this had the potential to be something that could be life-changing for people. And I was also very intrigued by the name, Emotional Algebra, the concept as well. So do you want to sort of just tell people where that came from and what's behind it?
Right. Well, the idea of emotional algebra is that we have many, many variables that we don't consider that affect our behavior. From where people would be in my office and we'd be talking about something that I'd say, now, is this how you'd say it at home? Or is this what would happen at work? Or, so I help people to look at the idea that there are variables you're not accounting for that are unconscious, semi-conscious, absolutely conscious to say, no, I wouldn't talk about that this way with you, kind of like, what would you think of me if I did, So that's where I talk about, if we're not real with ourselves, then how are we going to be real with others? And what those variables are is we have our known knowns, as we've heard years ago in a famous political discussion, our known unknowns, our unknown knowns, and our unknown unknowns. So sometimes what I'll do literally is I'll start to put these variables on the board, different emotions, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, outcomes, triggers, what's happening in the outside world, what are cultural issues, what are some political issues, what are community issues. We'll look at all these variables. And the other thing that's important to see is, how does the relationship between those variables change over time? What I help people sometimes to see is, when we're young, the relationship between our emotions, like let's say failure, our relationship between failure when we're younger might be additive. One failure plus the next failure plus the next failure. As we get older, it might become multiplicative. These numbers of failure times these numbers of failure equals this outcome, and sometimes even exponential. And I think as we look at those changing relationships between those variables, that's where we can really learn a lot more about how and why we do the things we do, how and why we've changed over time. And many times that's about understanding the emotions, the way we view them in the culture we live in, what is their true purpose and value to us, and how we transition to the way we've been taught and what we've been socialized to do, and what, to me, deeper inside, we really know is truth. And that's what this journey is about.
Very interesting. So a lot of new concepts for people to understand, to learn and understand. And in the first episode, you introduced the hierarchical model of power. And went through all that. And I would encourage listeners and viewers to go back and watch or listen to that first episode, because it gives a really good base of what concepts you're introducing and sort of where we're headed here. But do you want to quickly review that in briefly before we take a look at what's up for today?
Yeah. So the thing I really want to remind viewers of, or if you're tuning into this one, if you haven't seen the first episode, all these first 4 to 5 episodes are really building on each other. And they build on each other in understanding how we are, where we are, and how we got here, and where I want to help people to understand to go. And the basic models we want to look at is from the ways we look at power and why we look at power the way that we do. I think there's ways that we come here when we're born, And then I think there's ways that we're socialized to become due to forces of the people around us. And that's exactly kind of what we're looking at in that hierarchical model is we're supposed to figure out which circle we want to be. We talked last time about the idea of our ideal, and that's what we want to be. Our feel, which is the circle that we feel like. And for you viewers out there, what that hierarchical model looks like is a big circle to the little circle, and there can be, and in the model I've written on the screen, there's 5 circles, but there can be 2 circles or 500,000 circles. You know, the number of circles isn't as important as where we see ourselves in that progression in the hierarchy and what we do to get there. So we have our ideal, our feel, and our real. And in that, what we want to understand is how do we get to that circle? So how we learn to get power in the model we live in is we learn to undermine or go behind people's back, talk about them without them knowing about it, might use intimidation. We might usurp them, directly challenge them, try to get other people to directly challenge them, with us at their side, and or we look to other people in power, usually above us, to promote us and or demote us up and down the system, whether it's parents or bosses or other people in culture that might have that status power over us. And also people below us can promote us. I use the example of when we're parents, when we become parents and we have a child, all of a sudden we have that child we see entering at the bottom of the hierarchy, and we're supposed to rise to that level of status as parent and are supposed to know what we do. That kind of introduces the idea of the imposter syndrome and how often we feel we have this status that we don't believe in. And when we have that status we don't believe in, then we're trying to project one image to the world, why we feel totally differently inside. And that's where I feel like that disease comes from, that often leads to disease states in our physical and emotional and psychological world.
Very interesting. Imposter syndrome, I think, is a concept a lot of people can identify with.
Exactly. I think about 95 to 99% of us have experienced imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah. And now one thing that I do particularly like about how you explain these concepts is the use of visual aids, which we have here. So today we're going to learn about a new model of power. You want to talk about that, and then we'll take a look at it.
Absolutely. So what we're talking about today is what I call an equity model of power. That equity model of power says that we all have the potential for the same amount of power. And one thing I say immediately is equity does not mean equality. It's not that we're all the same. It's that we the potential be the same. So for you viewers, it's basically 5 circles that are all the same size, and they're all larger circles. Now, how do we find equity, people often ask? Well, we get that through our different gifts, strengths, weaknesses, handicaps, wisdom, experience, knowledge, and understanding. And in that, we find balance. So certain people's gifts might be other people's weaknesses, and that's really important to understand in this.
Now, Dr. E, I just, in looking at that diagram, and I'll put it back up here, I think that people's initial reaction to this will be, well, I very much understand the hierarchical model of power, particularly say in a work context, right? Where somebody needs to be the boss, somebody has to have some power over some other people and give directives and assignments and so forth. But how can that be the case? How can there be order if everyone has the same amount of power? I can just hear people asking that question.
Right.
So what do you tell people about that?
Well, I'll tell you, I get this question often when I'm working with families, and the parents are saying, what do you mean they have the same power? I said, it's not that they have the same power. It's aspirational. It's something that we work towards, because we're all working towards trying to grow and become. And to me, every day we're here to become a little bit better, to become a little bit wiser, to become a little bit more engaged in understanding ourselves and the people around us. So there are people who are gifted at leadership. There are people who are gifted in science, people who are gifted in junk collection and repurposing those things. There are people who are gifted at, again, teaching people. So what we understand is when we look at the world from a sense of equity and balance, we recognize each other's gifts and talents. And we realize that everybody is our teacher and everybody may be our student. And as a parent, that's really important. As a boss, that's important. One of the things I learned, I minored in sports psychology, is that a good coach doesn't coach every one of his players the same. just like a good parent shouldn't parent every one of their kids identically the same. Again, equity is about balance. So in that, what do? They have to find the strengths and teach to the strengths to ameliorate the weaknesses. And that's critical in that path, is understanding that interplay between teaching to the weaknesses or in teaching to the strengths to improve the weaknesses. We want to help people to see what you do well, to use those skills to see what you can end up doing better. So this truly is not one that contributes to any chaos or any anarchy. It actually contributes to more self-satisfaction, mutual satisfaction, and less conflict.
And Dr. E, when you talk about being a student and a teacher, it's almost Zen-like, almost a Zen-like concept. I think that's really interesting and something that people should keep in mind. I feel like, especially from a parenting perspective, you have a lot to learn when you're a new parent. So you do certainly become, in some way, a student and a teacher at the same time. In that case,
you're exactly right. And not only as a new parent, but throughout your children's lives, they're going to be your teachers. And I can't tell you how many times I've helped parents just to take a breath when they felt like they had to be in charge, or they felt like they were supposed to be in control, and they felt like they were failing and felt terrified of what the outcome was going to be. I said, what is your child trying to teach you? What are they trying to do for you, not to you? And in that, when they start to look more reflectively, and then the child starts to see that they have a voice, people who feel like they have a voice and are heard don't feel like they have to challenge authority, because it's not about authority. It's about working with people to find mutually beneficial solutions. So much of that hierarchical power is, once I get my power, I've got to hang on to it for as long as I can. And if I can hang on to it for as long as I can, then I'm going to win. And that's not the way it works. And we're going to get more to understanding a little bit deeper into those issues in the next episode, but those are basically some of the overviews of why we have the struggles we have.
Interesting, Dr. E. Okay.
So as we continue along this, what I want people to look at is there are different golden rules we talk about. I think people who grew up under Christian belief systems, they have often been taught the golden rule. And that golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I think we've all heard this, or many of us have heard this. And in that, what does that say? What is that teaching our kids? And what are we supposed to do to exemplify that model? Because the other golden rule that's considered is he who has the gold makes the rules. So in our world, which model do we really live by? And if we're living that way, whether it's with our kids or we're the boss and we have employees and we feel like we're exempt from the rules because we have status, we have power, we have money, we have fame, we have, knowledge. We use those definitions of our golden rules. We often use that idea of if I have the gold, I make the rules, as a weapon and tool for control and power. And what does that do to trust? What does that do to people who feel safe in those hierarchies? What does that do to feeling heard and respect? And that's the important thing to understand, is how do these golden rules affect the different ways to look at respect? So when we look at that equity model of power, and we look, to me, at that do unto others as you would have them do unto you model of respect, what we might see is that I believe that kids are born with equity, and I believe they're socialized in a hierarchy. So when they're born, they don't recognize race, socioeconomic status, religion, what school that you went to, where you live, how much money you make, who you hang out with. We're socialized into observing that, being that. Kids love unconditionally, to me. Now, they might have their different temperaments or approach to the world, but they are pretty much unconditional. So this equity-based respect is really about treat people how you want to be treated. If I learn and I've grown up in an environment that teaches love and self-respect, then I am going to continue to express love and self-respect. And to me, if you honor yourself, you honor others. And if you honor others, you're going to be honoring yourself.
Now, Dr. E, this seems like such a simple concept and maybe even easy concept, but it's not easy. Why do you think that is? Why have we fallen into more of this hierarchical model obviously you mentioned about it being, we're socialized into that, but why is that the case?
Right. To me, it's all about power. It's the way we've been taught to look at power, not how we came here, but what we were socialized into. And that way we look at power really is, it's a pandemic across the world. And it's been that way. We infect one generation after another, after another, after another. Why? Because it often serves people in power. And that's where, again, that hierarchical, he who has the gold that makes the rules, it engenders mistrust. It engenders a desire to more take power. And it really causes and contributes to more conflict than does it lead to favorable outcomes. I mean, just look at the world we live in today, whether we're looking at the political issues, the geopolitical issues. If the timing of this is in end of April, beginning of May in 2024, when we have our election coming up, and we also have the issues going on between Israel and the Palestinians, and we have people picking sides on that. And in that, are the people in power, do we feel that they're looking for a solution that's mutually beneficial? Or are they looking for a solution they feel benefits them? And that is hard to really debate about and really be truthful about, because again, we have often more than one motivation for our behaviors. And some of those motivations we might not want to be honest with, so we hide those motivations. And those are the things we keep inside, why we present the front that we feel might be more politically acceptable or relationally acceptable or religiously acceptable. So we define those rules of what we present, again, depending on the lens that we want to look through and the lens that we want to prevent for other people to see us with.
Interesting. And looking at the models, most people, it seems, are brought up into this hierarchical model. How hard or difficult is it to transition to a more equity-based model of power? Is that something that's easy for people to do? Can they do it? Can they toggle between a work context where it's hierarchical and they can't change that to where they come home and maybe take a little bit of a different approach, like you're suggesting here?
Well, it's a journey. Like I said, it's aspirational. A lot of people want to say that the model I'm presenting is idealistic and it's not realistic. I disagree. I think people who call things idealistic sometimes don't want to do the work, or they just want it to be the way it is because they know it. They don't want to learn new things. Similar to, why didn't I want to start my podcast? I felt afraid I'd feel failure. Well, for all you listeners and all you viewers out there, the purpose of failure is it tells you when it's time to learn. That's it. There is an equity-based reason and value to every emotion, just like there's an equity-based reason for all our ability to behave in ways that are mutually respectful. It motivates understanding. It motivates cooperation. It motivates personal empowerment and then empowerment of others. So the struggle is, like I said, if we've been socialized generation after generation after generation to believe in hierarchy, when, like I said, a truth to me is the equity model. And that's what we really want to work for. So if we start with our kids and we help our kids to become how they have the capability to be, and we look at ourselves and we understand maybe how we've been broken, and we help our young adults and teens see how they may be breaking, then we can start to work towards changing for future generations. It's not that we're the lost generations in this as the people who are adults now. It's that we have more work to do because we've got those knee-jerk reactions versus learning to respond. I used to go to Haiti and do workshops there to teach about building community. And what I would teach, the biggest thing I teach, is that if you don't have trust, you don't have a community. You just have a bunch of people living around each other. And what I teach them was that idea that I am here to teach the leaders in the communities and the parents and the adults how you've been broken in ways so that you can help create a better world for your kids. And so there would be adults to young adults and teenagers, to current leaders, to future leaders, and even some kids would attend those programs. And that by the end of the program, they'd see the value of it, and they'd see why I was teaching what they're teaching. And it was life-changing for some of them, because even after I haven't been able to be there for 5 years now, I still hear from those people and see the life-changing effects that work had on them. And I'm looking for the same thing to happen for all of us.
Now, in the last episode, Dr. E, you gave people a little bit of homework, things they can do, apply some of the new concepts that you introduced in that episode. Anything that people can do now to build on that
Right.
with some of the new knowledge that you've just walked people through right here.
Yeah, I think some of that is really, again, be mindful. Be mindful of when you slip up. Own your mistake. If you might feel like you become, and again, in future episodes, we're going to give many, many, many more examples. But right now, rather than looking at behaviors you can implement, be mindful, be aware, own your stuff. If you feel like you had an opportunity that you could empower somebody rather than trying to show you are more powerful than them, or if you even had an opportunity where you can express your power with people. I think the thing to look at here is what we're looking at is the idea that in the hierarchical model, it's often about having power over people. And in the equity model, it's about having power with people. So when I do these discussions, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I would meet with team groups, I'd often in the beginning present these models, and I say, which model do you think you like more? Before I really got into it. And they'd all say, well, we like that hierarchical model. And then I'd go back and I'd finish the whole discussion, and I'd say, which model do you like more now? And they're saying, we like the equity model, because they understood what they were really seeking, but they didn't feel they could get, because they lost trust and faith in the people that had led them through life. And they felt that fear of feeling controlled and feeling manipulated. And I think the thing to even understand as we extend this is to look at what are the emotions that drive each of these two models. The emotion that drives the hierarchical model is fear. Fear exists throughout that model, from the little circle, who feels like he feels afraid of the people above him because it could control him, hurt him, harm him, take things away, all the things that we give people status overs to do. He also needs those same bigger circles or different larger circles to take care of him, to love him, to protect him, to guide him, to foster him so that he can do or she can do what they feel they want to do. The next circle up feels afraid because they still feel afraid of the larger ones for the same reasons. And they feel they need the larger ones for the same reasons. They also feel afraid that the smaller one can undermine them or usurp them, so they have to watch their back. We'll continue that progression up that hierarchy from the little circle all the way to the big circle. And what you start to realize is that even a big circle feels afraid because he might get usurped or undermined, or those beneath him may want to take his power. That's where we get in the idea of, to me, I define the difference between terrorists and revolutionaries in that structure. That people often band together to overthrow those in power who don't believe in it. Those in power call those people terrorists. Those people who want to make the change and affect change see themselves as revolutionaries. And that's where, again, it's all about the lens we're looking from. And maybe if we backed up and we started to take an honest view at the people in those positions that we have deemed ourselves better than, stronger than, that we feel entitlement over, and that we feel we should be in that place because we're smarter, we're more wealthy, we have a different and better history because of what we believe in. As long as we view that lens, we're not talking the same language and we're not seeing through our collective eyes. And as I said, when I did my work in Haiti, it was life-changing for a lot of those people. It was life-changing for me because even the people who participate in the groups, the things that they felt when we were done and the things that they say, you have to continue this work, really felt empowering to me.
And Dr. E, you were in Haiti not long after the earthquake, if I'm not mistaken, right? The earthquake in 2010 that killed thousands of people and was devastating to the country.
Right. Yeah. And it was again about helping them rebuild. And even in that was who were they looking to in that situation? One of the situations, I would say if you're looking to your government and or the UN or other countries to come to your rescue, you're not going to find the answers there. It's important for you all to start to learn how you can work together. But because there was so much mistrust throughout so many people in that country, they couldn't trust each other to help each other, let alone know how to help themselves. And it's not about that they can't do it. They needed some way to be guided to know how to do that. And I'm not saying I'm that answer or I was that answer. I'm a tool. I'm one tool in the toolbox that I want to help people to see how they can build better lives, not just individually, but together as a family, as a community, as a country, as a culture, because the answers all lie within us. If we just look back at equity and see we all have our gifts and strengths and abilities and wisdom and experience and knowledge and understanding, we'll see that equity and balance is the way forward. Not having power over, but not having power with. And that's where what I teach is that equity is based in love. And if I learn to love and respect and honor myself, I will love and respect and honor people. We're not taught really to love ourselves. We're taught that we're supposed to get love from outside of ourselves. And that includes, like I said, where we believe we're supposed to find our power.
Very interesting. So love-based versus fear-based, Dr. E. Some new concepts here for people to consider. What should people do in between now and the next episode with these ideas? I mean, some of them are simple ideas, the golden rule, or seemingly simple. At least be thinking about that if you're not going to act that way, right?
Right. And again, it's about being more mindful. It's about, as you're presented with these concepts and these ideas, be mindful. Think about these different things. Know that we're going to be going over these concepts again and again and again. That's why I want to talk about these issues, as we see them in our lives and in our politics and in our countries and in, even within our spiritual and religious beliefs, to see how are they playing themselves out so that we can learn more and more about ourselves. It's, if you look at a diamond, the gift of the diamond is all the facets that it has that are cut into it. And every facet gives you a little bit different angle for light. And why, the light comes from outside of the diamond. I want to help people to see that their light comes from within themselves. And as we believe more in equity and we believe more in ourselves, we will then help other people to see their light and find their strengths.
Very good, Dr. E. A lot to consider there, a lot to think about. And much Absolutely. More to come to explore in our next episode. Do you want to give a little hint as to what we might talk about in the next one?
We're going to continue on with kind of, now that we have the two models of power, I'm going to go back and talk about more about what is the problem, what are the difficulties with that hierarchical model of power and why it leads to conflict. What are the ways we look at it that lead to these challenges and difficulties that we're seeing every day within ourselves and the world. Ultimately, we're going to get to, like I said, to looking at roles that are played in that. We're going to be looking at relationships and why our relationships are the way they are. And then, we'll be continuing into conflict escalation and conflict management and different ways to understand that through our emotions. The key to all this is the way we look at emotion. And that's where the ways we look at emotion right now are hierarchically. And we want to understand how our hierarchical views of emotion don't let them express their truth of what they're trying to teach us, show us, do for us, help us do for ourselves, or help us to learn. And those are the 5 reasons that I feel that emotions are gifted to us in this universe.
And like you said, having the language, having the terms to be able to apply to some of these concepts is a huge first step for people. So Absolutely. Great that we've been able to introduce these ideas and give people something to apply to their own lives on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I appreciate you for being a part of the journey, Andrew.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, like I said, and I can't wait to get into more of it in the next episode. So Dr. E.
Until next time.